Alright, so before we get into this list, I want to make it very clear that this is not a difficulty tier list. Instead, we're going to be basing the rankings of the bosses on overall enjoyment, the aesthetic of not only the boss, but the arena it's fought in, how fun, enjoyable the fight exactly is, the lore is somewhat taken into consideration, and finally, overly easy / artificially difficult bosses are penalized. So I just wanted to make that really clear before we get into the video. Now, let's get to the rankings. So what do I think of the Asylum Demon? I think he is an excellent tutorial boss. You fight him right at the end of the Asylum, fittingly. And he's quite easy. It also has that bit of a puzzle where you're not supposed to fight him right at the beginning when he first arrives into the arena. So it kind of gives you a bit, more of a tutorial of kind of exploring your surroundings. As a new Dark Souls player entering DS1 for the first time ever, kind of gives you an idea of like how, the best way to take something on isn't necessarily the first way that's like presented. You gotta use your mind. So it forces you to explore the rest of the asylum, get the plunge attack finally, taking out a good, at least a third of his health, which also, again, gives you a little tutorial for plunging attacks. It's a really nice intro boss, and I don't think he's a great boss, but I think he's good. So now, next up, we essentially just have reskins, and this is going to be a huge detriment for any of these ranking videos I'm going to be doing. Reskins, I am not a fan of. I just think it's kind of lazy, especially with Stray Demon. He's almost essentially the exact same boss. And you fight him almost in the exact same area, instead the basement of the Undead Asylum. Now, while he does have a few extra moves in his arsenal similar to Fire Sage, he doesn't feel different enough to me. I would have preferred something that maybe had a similar vibe, maybe a sort of demon, just not, essentially, like, you could barely even tell the difference from the little PNGs I'm using here. So that being said, he's not trashed here, but I think he's meh, and I think that's where his Fire Brother, maybe just slightly ahead of him. I think this is a fair spot for these two. Alright, next up we have Taurus Demon. This is, again, an interesting one. He kind of fits the same mold as Asylum Demon, in the sense that he is more or less just a tutorial boss. However, I do think the aesthetic of fighting on the bridge, like the dilapidated castle around you, it's a nice touch. I like it quite a bit, and the whole sun aesthetic is really nice. So I think he's good. I think this is yeah, I think he's good. Alright, so next up, we have the famed Bell Gargoyles. These, in my opinion, are the first real Dark Souls boss you face. Just out of the gate. I think this is, if these two are an introduction to the mechanics of the game, Bell Gargoyles is an introduction to the pain that will be delivered by this game. At first, it seems quite, simple. He flies down, you fight him, but then, of course, the surprise of the second gargoyle coming in gives you, it lets you know what you're in for. So I think on top of just the grandiose nature of being atop of the undead parish, knowing that the bell is like right within vision, you can see it. I think this fight is so excellent. I think it's not a god tier boss for me. I still struggle with gargoyles. I'm doing some speed running over on Twitch, and I gotta be honest, gargoyles has killed a few runs for me. I personally think they are a great boss. Maybe they'll be a little bit further down, but I definitely think for a tier, gargoyles, great boss, fits nice. Next up, we have everyone's favorite boss, Capra Demon. He's god tier, no question. Gaping Dread. No, I'm joking. Capra, I literally made this tier down here, bullshit, for Capra and one other boss that lays down here. Capra, unfortunately, falls into this really toxic circumstance where by himself he's a cool looking enemy. He has, a punishingly fast and aggressive, but also like entertaining fight style. So you really feel as though like it's not something you just wait around, you hit him once, you back off, It kind of has that like Bloodborne, like hyper aggression that I really like. And so I actually love Capra as a basic like area enemy that you fight later in Demon Ruins. So I like Capra. It's just, of course, the arena is horrible. And one of the criteria we're using for today's video is the arena. Capra suffers from being in this. It's not even suffers, it's more just Miyazaki kind of like sticking it to players. The absurdly small area with the 2 ganky dogs that didn't need to be there just completely soured the experience of what otherwise could have been a really fantastic boss fight. Alright, next up we have the king of nightmare fuel being Gaping Dragon. Now I am quite sad that on my like more recent playthroughs I almost always skip the depths. God, I love this boss. I think the arena is wide enough where it kind of lets you figure out how you want to fight him yourself. It has a little bit of a puzzle element with, you know, the meme wizard up on top. You have to know to go kill him first because he will buff Gaping, and that's just not something you want. He's not insanely difficult, so maybe that takes a little bit away from him. I feel like the design is something so menacing, and it just kind of doesn't translate to gameplay. So for that, I think he's going to sit in good. I don't think he's quite a great boss. I think he's somewhere in the middle. But for now, I'm going to put him as the king of good. Alright, talking about Nightmare Fuel, we have Quelaag, the reward for going through Blight Town, aka FPS Town. What do I think of Quelaag? I think she is, oh lord. I think Quelaag is pretty good. Now, I feel as though she's really fitting for the area that she's in, like this disgusting spider-human hybrid that you find at the end of like this horribly just murky and sad area that's in Dark Souls. So I just feel like she's the perfect crowning jewel for the area. And so for that, I have to give her some extra points. The only thing, this could just be me, you know, being salty, you know, get good. I'm not a huge fan of the AoE attack that she does, the blast. She's really not bad, and you get used to the move. I just think it's a little cheesy, but whatever, that's fine. I think she's a pretty great boss. I love the arena you fight her in, inside her nest. I think it's the perfect, like I've said, it's the perfect crowning jewel of Blighttown. I think I'm going to put her at great boss. Alright, next up, we have Moonlight Butterfly. Now, I love Dark Souls' approach to very limited use of music. That's what makes, like, Ash Lake and Firelink really just stand out for me. And so, the music that plays during Moonlight Butterfly is incredible. Now, unfortunately, that's kind of where the end of, like, the pros column ends for this boss. Now, for the most part, you're most likely going to be running a melee character, and so it just kind of devolves into playing dodgeball with her until she, for some reason, just takes a little sleep on the bridge, and you can just beat the shit out of her. I don't know, it's a very weird design for me. It's something that's probably designed with the idea of, like, oh, this will be a really cool, like, sorcery fight, which is great, but it alienates the other, like, 85% of builds in the game. So, Moonlight is sadly going to be the first trash tier boss for me. I just think it's a boring fight. Alright, next up we have Iron Golem, and if Iron Golem isn't the absolute epitome of average, I don't know what is. Iron Golem is just this... He is just so... similar to Moonlight, just so basic fantasy boss of all time. You know, the giant knight atop the castle, like... Okay, I love a good, you know, swordsman fight, and you're going to see that a little bit later, you know, just as a bit of a spoiler, you're going to see where I play some of these swordsmen here. I like the humanoid bosses. I'm not one of these people who really, like, just hates on that. I just find Iron Golem to be super underwhelming. I find the fight really not overly easy to the point where it's just brain dead. Something like Moonlight, or, you know, this guy down here, which we'll get to soon enough. But he's also, like, you could pretty much just turn your brain off. You could cheese him extraordinarily easy with getting him off the bridge. There is the puzzle element of having to fight the fire thrower atop the castle before fighting Iron Golem, which is cool. And I like what he signifies as, like, the last defender before going on to Anor Londo, which is one of the most beautiful areas in the entire series. I just think the fight itself is really underwhelming. It's just nothing special. Alright, next up, we have O and S, the absolute poster children of the Dark Souls series. I am horrible at this boss. I remember on my first couple playthroughs doing very well against them. And then I remember on stream, I was telling everyone in chat that I'm going to smoke this boss, and I must have died 40 times in a row. I'm so bad at O and S randomly, but that still doesn't take away from how just incredible this fight is. It's the most balanced gang fight in the entire series. I don't even think it's particularly close. Using Smo's like sweltering weight against him, and the ability to have the columns in the arena that really helps you separate them, it's just something that lets you kind of like use a creative method of fighting them. I also think the designs of just Ornstein and so individually are just incredible. I love how they like perfectly encapsulate Anor Londo with the golden regal designs, and how they fit into the lore. Ornstein being one of Gwyn's like dragon soldiers, just it's all of it is so good. I love the idea of killing one of them empowers the other one, and so it's another choice that you have to kind of factor in. You know, do you want a slower, much larger Ornstein, or do you want a much quicker Smo? It's so good. There's so much packed into this boss fight. The arena is beautiful. Looking out the windows while fighting, if you have the, you know, chance to, is incredible. I just god tier. God tier. Not much more you could say. It's god tier. Alright, next up we have Dark Sun Gwendolyn. This is easily one of the most forgettable bosses in the entire game. It's an optional boss. It's not a very fun boss. It's kind of just Moonlight all over again, where you just dodge sorcery until you run up and hit him a couple times. Do I think he's trashed? He's probably trashed here, maybe a little bit below Moonlight. I think this is a good spot for him. Yeah, Gwendolyn, not my favorite. I feel like there could have been way more done here. Alright, next up we have Crossbreed Priscilla. I don't have too much to say about Priscilla, to be honest. I love the arena. I love that area leading up to Priscilla. I think the Pain World is a great addition to the series. I don't have strong feelings about her one way or the other. I actually like the gimmick, which is something FromSoft typically doesn't do well, are these gimmicky puzzle bosses. I think, however, Priscilla's invisibility and watching the footprints on the snow is actually kind of cool. For that, I'm gonna put her probably ahead of Taurus in the good boss territory. I think this is fair. Moving along, we are on to Seath the Scaleless. Aesthetically, this is one of my favorite like dragon type bosses that we get in this series, and surprisingly there's quite a few of those. I love Seath. I think his area is great. I think the puzzle is, you know, kind of like, why is it even there, but whatever. It's, you know, because of the lore, you know, it's kind of whatever, but it's cool. Breaking the crystal so he becomes immune, takes damage, Scaleless, I get it. He's cool. I think he's good. I think, again, he's probably going to fit right around here. So this would be the first of the Lord Souls that you go against, and I think he's good. I think it's a fair placement for him. Alright, next up we have Pinwhale. This is a boss I really want to love because I like the aesthetic. I like the fact that the arena is a giant coffin and he's essentially like this, you know, like demon of death. Like he's Nito's apprentice. I love everything about Pinwhale except for the fact that he's Pinwhale and he's just such a joke of a boss. Literally just because of his difficulty, I don't even know if I want to put him ahead of the like Taurus ripoffs, like the Walmart and Costco brand versions of Asylum Demon. I love Pinwheel's design. I love the idea of what he is, but I hate the fight. It's just such a joke. So just for that alone, I think I have to put him ahead of the reskins. I think he goes right here. It's not a good fight. Alright, now I hate literally everything about the lead up to Nito. I hate Tomb of the Giants. I hate the gimmick of it being dark so you can't see, so it's harder. Like, it's just such an artificially difficult thing. Artificial difficulty is something that, you know, ruins a lot of these fights, sadly. But it doesn't affect Nito himself. The arena and the fight itself is incredible. I love Nito. I think aesthetically, Nito being the god of death, you know, releasing the miasma of disease, as they say, is just, oh my god. I literally think I might get flamed for this. I genuinely would put Nito in god tier. I think the design, I just fit. I'm stumbling over my own words thinking about just how well he fits the lore and what he's supposed to be. Like when you think like the very embodiment of death, Nito just, oh, it fits. It's so good. The only reason why I wouldn't have him even like ahead of ONS is just the one mechanic that's just bullshit, and it's the fact that you have to take fall damage entering his arena. That is just, again, artificial difficulty. It just doesn't feel good at all. But yeah, he's so good. Oh, I love Nito. Alright, next up we have a fan favorite, Great Wolf Sif. I think it was VatiVidya who put it so beautifully. He said there's such an atmosphere around this fight because you, as the undead chosen to slain Gwyn and either usher in a new age of fire or just terminate it, you're oath sworn to fight to get the ring to bring you down to the abyss. And Sif is oath sworn to defend it. It's one of these things where you really understand why not only you, but the NPC you're fighting is fighting, and it just has so much raw emotion. And the idea that you can have him fight along you with one of the DLC fights, which we'll get to later, is just, there's so much emotion in this fight. It kind of brings on the whole side story of Artemis to begin with, which is just one of the greatest myths in like video game history. Great Wolf Sif is just, it's such a good fight. Also, it really does pull on my heartstrings every single time. I mean, when you leave him with just a sliver of health left and you see him stumping around holding his little paw up, it hurts. It hurts. I think he's not really the most fun boss to fight because you can kind of just cheese him by sitting underneath him. So I think he's a great boss. I think just the actual fighting him probably keeps him out of god tier, but as far as like lore and like the meaning behind the fight, god, he is so high class. Alright, next up we have pretty much the exact opposite side of that same coin, the Four Kings of New Londo. While they also tie into, again, one of the best myths in video game history, as I just stated, man, this is not a fun boss. The Four Kings to me are literally just stat check bosses. That's what I always call them. It's a stat check boss. And these are the kings, the Four Kings of stat checks. What I mean by stat checks is, do you have enough DPS? Yes. Do you have enough poise? Yes. Then the boss is going to be easy. If you don't have either of those, then it's just going to be an awful, really ganky experience. I think it's average. It's the ultimate stat check. It's not a matter of can you outplay this boss, it's do you have the tools to do it, you know what I mean? It's more just, like I said, do you have the damage? Yes. Do you have the poise to just tank him and hit him? Yes. Okay, go for it. Not a great boss design in my opinion, and that's why he gets the average. Alright, next up we have Scaleless. I honestly cannot remember the last time I actually fought Scaleless. Yeah, that just goes to show like what this boss, I'm just gonna say he's trash tier for me. He's the king of trash tier. I like the aesthetic, although he does kind of just like look like the amalgamation of any other fire thing in any other fantasy game ever. He's cool, I kind of get the lore. The arena he's in is kind of lackluster, that entire portion of the game. The Demon Ruins and Lost Izalith are just super lazy and really bland to begin with. And then on top of the fact that this is the most notoriously cheesable boss in the entire series, it's not great. I'm really not a fan. If you don't know about the cheese, I almost don't even want to tell you what it is, because it really just completely negates even Scaleless being a boss. Alright, as we make our trek further into the Demon Ruins and onto Lost Izalith, we go against yet another fire boss. The arena is just as lazy and just as, actually worse than Scaleless, because this boss fight feels more as though you're fighting the arena than you're fighting him. It's just a tiny little area. Yes, I know you can go off to the right where you have more space to move around, but then you're taking fire damage and you might hit you on the way there, and it's just, again, it feels like you're fighting the arena. Artificial difficulty, as I've been saying throughout this entire video. I think he could have benefited from maybe a more unique and fresh feeling. I don't like the fight much at all. I think he sits right above the Asylum discount brand versions. Alright, next up we have part 2 of why I made the bullshit tier. The Bed of Chaos. Now if you're wondering why it's just the bug, because the boss actually is just the bug on the inside of the tree. So yeah, he goes right in there. Bed of Chaos. Why are we trying to make Dark Souls into like a platformer? This was such a bad idea, and it's so disappointing that after going through 2 of the worst areas in the entire Souls series, being the Demon Ruins and the Lost Izalith, you don't even get a reward. Like, going through Blighttown isn't so much bad as it is just kind of like dreadful, but even going through Blighttown, you get rewarded with a pretty fantastic boss in Quelaag. Going through Lost Izalith, oh, it's bad. It's so bad. It does kind of make up for its own toxicity with the fact that your progress is saved each time you fight them. It just completely distorts and almost bastardizes everything you know about a Dark Souls boss fight, and I really don't understand why it's implemented in this way. I feel like it could have been such, like a tiny little bug that kind of has control over anything. Could have been such a great idea, and we're going to see that when I get to the Dark Souls 2 tier list, because the Chaos Bug does make a little cameo in Dark Souls 2 for a specific boss that I absolutely adore. But we'll talk about that in probably about a week. You'll see what I mean then. This game just completely drops the ball. It's just such a bad boss. So that's why I have the bullshit tier for these 2 bad boys right here. Lastly, we have our Lord of Cinder, Gwyn. Firstly, I think the arena is incredible. It's spacious but fits the design. The soundtrack that's playing Gwyn's theme, Plin Plin Plon. This is Plin Plin Plon we're talking about here. This is a god tier soundtrack. I feel like he fits the idea of a final Dark Souls boss so perfect. I love Gwyn. I love everything about Gwyn. The fact that you can parry him kind of cheaps out the fight a little bit, in my opinion, which is sad, but at the same time, it's kind of rewarding. You know, it's something that you learn to do against basic NPCs throughout the entire game. You don't even think to do it on the Lord of Cinder, Gwyn, and it's just, oh my god, it's so good. I love it. Gwyn is fantastic. He's a god tier boss. Boom, love him. Alright, so next up we have the 4 DLC bosses, and this is where, as usual, FromSoft really turns up the difficulty on the players. Being Sanctuary Guardian, this is the boss I struggle with probably the most in Dark Souls 1. I don't even understand why. He's essentially just like a faster Vort from DS3, but it's just, there's something about his moveset that just dominates me every time. That being said, I think the design is fantastic. Again, I love the arena. I love how the DLC wastes 0 time giving you action immediately, so the DLC immediately feels worth the money you paid. It's a really high octane. It's the complete opposite of Moonlight. I think Sanctuary Guardian is a great boss. He's not quite Quelaag, I don't believe, in my opinion, but I think he is still a great boss and definitely deserves a pretty high ranking. I think this is a very fair spot for Sanctuary Guardian. Next up, as if you couldn't already tell by my fanboying of Artorias during the Sif and 4 Kings explanations, I'm not even going to waste any time. Artorias is, in my opinion, the best fight in all of Dark Souls 1. No other boss in this game carries the same weight as Artorias. Just being told from all the different NPCs of his tales, which you end up finding out are actual lies and just myths, to the whole notion of his nobility of trying to fend off the world from the abyss. It's just such a good fight. The emotions, as they were with Sif, are just at top tier. And the game putting you inside a literal coliseum just adds to this tension of this incredible 1v1 with this fallen soldier. That, I think, to me, is one of the greatest things Dark Souls does, is give these characters emotion and history behind them. It makes fighting them feel like so much less of just a challenge and more of a great story arc in a fantastic novel. Fighting Artemis feels like the peak of Dark Souls 1 in my opinion. I love him. I love his moveset. I find the fight itself mechanically is really rewarding. He has so many moves for you to learn, but once you do, you feel like a master. You feel like you're dancing with him. And just seeing the abyss seep from Artemis during the fight with the magic that he uses and the goo that falls from his body, it just feels as though he's handing the torch to you as the final Abyss Watcher. Yeah, in short, this is just such a great... Wow. Crowning Jewel of DS1, he's so good. I'm gonna stop gushing now, and we're gonna go on to Calamity. Calamity, in my opinion, is the hardest boss in this entire game. Now, he's pretty close to Manus in difficulty, but I think Calamity is just a bit more difficult. But what do I think about Calamity exactly? I think he's kind of just a run-of-the-mill sort of boring dragon boss, where Seath feels way more unique in his design and lore. Calamity just kind of feels like, you know, oh, I'm the big scary dragon, watch out Ulasil, I'm gonna destroy you. He's just, you know, the supreme difficulty of the fight is really rewarding once you finally conquer him, so that's what's going to keep him out from the below average tier. So I think he's going to be at the base of good. I like Calamity. He's definitely not my favorite. He's okay. Finally, we have Manus, the other notoriously difficult boss in this game. Now again, similar to Nito, I'm really not a fan of the areas leading up to him, because it's essentially his Tomb of the Giants, you know, part 2. I don't like it at all. I find the enemies leading up to him are pretty lackluster. I think, again, the whole dark cave aesthetic, while I get it fits his lore, being like trapped away beneath Ulasil as the pygmy from the Ring City, it's cool, I get it, but it does negatively impact my opinion on Manus. However, not enough for him to stay out of the great boss territory. Now that might have been a swing, but I love Manus. Is the epitome to me of unique demon. You look at Asylum, he's cool, he's up here mainly just because I think he's a top tier introduction boss, similar to like Eodix Gundyr. But then when you compare him to Fire Sage and Stray Demon, even Ceaseless, it just shows how much more time they had to put into Manus. He's just incredibly unique. I don't quite think... Actually, no, I'm going to put him ahead of Sanctuary. I, again, don't think... Quailag's been kind of like a guardian for the top tier. I don't think he's quite Quailag. I think he fits here quite nicely, and looking back on this list, I am very happy with my placements. So, if you have any different opinions, please leave them below in the comments. Let me see it. You know, again, this is a personal preference video. This is nothing objective here. If I put your favorite boss in bullshit tier, if Bed of Chaos is your favorite boss, first of all, maybe go to a hospital, check yourself out. I don't know about that, but hey, I'm sorry I put it in the bullshit tier. Again, this is my list, but I'd love to hear what you guys think, so please comment down below, like the video, hit that subscribe button, you know, it takes 2 seconds, and it'll give you notifications for when the lists for DS2 and DS3 come out. So, hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you on the next one. Ciao.